Hello everyone! Thank you again for visiting my channel. Please do subscribe after you watch the whole video, hit the like and then click the bell. So for today, I am going to discuss with you about nationalism and patriotism and the context of the laws of the Philippines. But now, let us discuss what laws of the Philippines are relative to nationalism and patriotism. All political communities governed by laws, rules, or policies which the inhabitants are bound to follow and render their obedience. All of us has to follow the rules that are set for our country. These rules are anchored from the established commandments that are enshrined in the book of the teachings of faith, and that is the Bible. Whether we like it or not, when we were born, our parents, our forefathers, our elders, our ancient grandfathers has already been practicing faith. There was no Bible during the time, but history reveals that they have their own beliefs. These beliefs they used to develop until Christianity was introduced during the time of the Spaniards, in which case Christianity involves now the use of the Bible. Being loyal to one's country and loving the country is not an easy task. One has to become patriotic, one has to become nationalistic. But all these characters are being anchored in Matthew 6:24 of the Bible. It says that no one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. This is the basis on which why Filipinos and aliens must have to take the oath of allegiance, because the oath of allegiance would tell you whether you are loyal to the country or you love your own country. Taking the oath of allegiance is taking your vow that you should be loyal and be obedient to all the laws and rules set forth by a certain country, and that you are bound to show your love for your country. Thereby, you must have to promote national interest in whichever case you are. In order for a certain individual to determine whether he's going to follow the rules, the laws, or the policies that have been enacted by a certain state, he might as well have to know what are the laws. What are the laws that he is going to follow? Now, for the Philippines, we have what we call the foundations of our laws, and that is what we call the Philippine Constitution. But first, we have to define what is the Constitution itself. Well, the Constitution, according to Malcolm in his book in Philippine Constitutional Law, states that it is a written instrument, enacted by whom? By direct action of the people. So it is an action, or it is a performed act, not by some people or few people, but by the people, all people. However, do not get me wrong, these people as a whole are represented by the legislative department, those who are in charge in legislating or making laws. Okay, so it is a written instrument. It is not what we call as uncodified or common law. Okay. And this is where the fundamental powers of the government are being written and are being distributed from several departments or agencies For what purpose? For their safe and useful exercise, for the benefit of the body politic. If you talk about body politic, then you are talking about the people themselves. In that definition alone of a constitution, there are already basic features that you can see on that context. First, that it is a written instrument. Second, that it has been enacted by the people. Third, that it has a government from which the will of the state are being organized, formulated, and implemented. And there is a purpose, please, that is to safeguard the body politic or the inhabitants of a certain country to which that constitution is being enacted. Now, talking about Philippine Constitution, then we have to consider the kinds of constitution. Philippine Constitution takes the first kind, which is a codified constitution, or that which are written. Written laws, these are jurisprudence or cases that has been decided by scholars or by judges, by elders in cases of extrajudicial settlements that has been written from one generation to another, showing each in every kind a development or innovation on the method or on the principles of law that they are using to render justice and fairness. These are being collected, they are being written, and they are being binded. And that is what we call now the written or the codified constitution. On the other hand, there are states, there are countries who base their resolution of cases or case settlements on common laws. Common laws are what we call as unwritten or uncodified constitution. Is there a certain constitution that are not being written? Yes, there is. Uncodified or unwritten constitution are the laws or principles that has been decided or has been promulgated by judges, the judicial department, by elders, or by authorities who have the capacity or the capability and the integrity to decide a case. And these principles, these decisions of cases are being used in resolving future cases. These are not codified, they are said to be unwritten or uncodified, not because they are not actually written on a certain paper, but because there hasn't been a single document where you can see all of these principles or decisions. Well, unlike in the Philippine Constitution, which is a written constitution, that if you want to decide a certain case, or if a judge is going to decide a certain case, brought to its court, then he is just going to open the Philippine Constitution, okay, from which the criminal law, the constitutional law, administrative law, obligations and contracts, and other laws of the Philippines are being anchored. So he's just going to open the Philippine Constitution, and it is where he has to base the decision that he is going to make in that particular case. In other countries where there is uncodified or unwritten constitution, there is no single document from which they are going to base their decision. What are they going to use to decide a case? Jurisprudence, meaning to say those previous decisions that has been ruled out by judges, by elders. Okay? So it's not actually literal that it is unwritten. It is said to be unwritten or uncodified because these principles of law that they use to decide in cases are not collected and codified or binded in one single document. That is why it is called common law. Okay. Aside from the kinds of constitution that we have, we already know that the Philippine Constitution is a written or a codified constitution. How can we say now that our constitution is a good constitution? Is there a good constitution in a bad constitution? Well, there is. There is for the reason that they had given us the features of a good constitution. Okay? It says there in our reference that a good constitution must be rigid. Rigid meaning to say that it is stable. Stable in the sense that we should not change what is written in our constitution just to favor a certain party in a particular case. Rigid in the sense that all the provisions written in that particular constitution must be interpreted in accordance to fairness and justice and must be implemented in strictissimi juris, meaning to say it must be strictly implemented by those people in charge in the implementation thereof. Rigid. Next one, in order for you to determine whether the Constitution is good or not, it must be brief and concise. You might be asking me, Mom, the Philippine Constitution contains so many pages. How do you say that it is brief and concise? Well, class, concise and brief doesn't mean or does not talk about the pages. It talks about the provisions itself. That when you are going to read a certain provision of the law, you can already determine the subject of that particular provision. That it is not complex, that it only contains one particular subject. One provision, one subject. Brief and concise. It doesn't cover so many things. It is specific into each subject. That is why if you are going to read a particular provision on what is theft, okay, that particular provision does not contain about robbery. It only contains about theft. All about theft. Single subject. Brief and concise. That is what we call brief and concise. Do not argue with me if I say that the Philippine Constitution is a good constitution because it's brief and concise, saying that it's not concise because it contains so many pages. Well, you are taking the word brief and concise literally if you do that. Okay, I hope you understand. So let's go to the last part of this discussion. It's all about the constitutions of the Philippines. So the Constitution of the Philippines started from the Malolos Constitution, and that was in 1899. This comes in a parliamentary type of government, wherein revolutionary was the theme of such government. This is the time that the Spanish was still here in the Philippines. It has a unicameral legislature and it consists of the Spanish Council. Well, if we say unicameral legislature, there is a fusion between the upper house and the lower house. You already know that our Congress in the Philippines as of today is a bicameral legislature. That is, we have the upper house or the executive department and the lower house or the legislative department. You fuse the two, then you will have a unicameral legislature just like in the Malolos Constitution. Meaning to say that The executive department and the legislative department has to perform their task as one single body. There was no such thing as review of the bill that is passed by the lower house to the upper house. Because in the first place, if you say unicameral legislature, there is no upper house or lower house to talk about, since there is only one Congress, one legislative department. Now, after that, Commonwealth Constitution in 1935 came into existence. This is in a presidential type of government. This is the first time wherein a president was already being elected in the Philippines. It also began that the Philippines will have a bicameral legislature in such a way that the executive department is already being separated from the lower house or the legislative department. The executive department is being composed by the heads of departments, the cabinet secretaries, and the like, while the lower house is composed of the elected representatives of the people. And those we are talking about are the governors, the congressmen, the party list, and the like. After the Commonwealth Constitution in 1935, there is again an amendment to the Constitution, an innovation of such, or an enhancement, I should say, of the Constitution. And that's the time that we gained our independence, in which we call the Third Republic. And during the time that we experienced the dictatorial form of government under the lead of President Ferdinand Marcos. During the time, we have already a bicameral form of legislature, but in application or in function, they are in reality a unicameral, I should say, legislative department. Which means that even though there is an executive department and the legislative department, when they perform their task, there's no check and balance between them because they act as one. They are only a bicameral in name, but in action, they are unicameral. Until such time that after the dictatorial form of government from President Marcos, we already have what we call the 1987 Constitution that has been framed or created by the Constitutional Committee. And in this type of constitution, we already have and enjoy up to this day a presidential type of government, a democratic form of government with a bicameral legislature. That is why we already have our president, we have our Senate, we have our lower house or the congressmen. That is a bicameral legislature, in which case the three powers of the government are already being balanced. There is the principle of check and balance that now exists on the government of the Philippines. Well, class, that is already the Constitution of the Philippines. Thank you very much for watching the video and listening to the discussion. So next time, I will be uploading more of the discussion on our class so that you would be able to get hand and listen to it, watch for it every time and then that you have your spare time. So that network will no longer be an issue for as long as you have your data on your Facebook. Thank you very much, and please don't forget to subscribe on my channel.